Minister, can
Minister
you give us
Freeland,
an update on the...
Good afternoon, everybody.
Minister Freeland, can you explain why Canada is asking Ontario to help out on the subsidy side, the production subsidy side for Stellantis when that was not a request that was made on the Volkswagen deal?
So let me just start by setting the stage a little bit. And I do think it's important to really be clear that our government absolutely believes in the car sector. We absolutely believe in the green transition. And truly, there is no federal government in Canadian history that has done more to support the Canadian car sector and Canadian auto workers than our government. We fought for the car sector in the NAFTA negotiations. We fought to have Canada carved into the U.S. EV incentives, absolutely essential for the future of our industry. And we are working hard right now with the incentives built into our budget, with the industrial policy incentives built into our budget, and direct negotiations with companies to ensure that Canada is a leader in electric vehicle production. So our government is absolutely there. We're absolutely supportive. Having said that, or not having said that, as part of that effort, it is so important to ensure a few things. One, from my perspective, is our green industrial policy needs to deliver for everyone in the country, from coast to coast to coast. I was at Finance Committee yesterday, and one of the very reasonable questions I was asked was, you know, great that the government is doing all this stuff in Ontario. What's going to happen in other provinces? I take that concern very seriously. And from my perspective, the way to ensure that the federal government's industrial policy delivers for the whole country is to ensure that provinces that are getting the direct benefit pay their share.
Then why not on
and
Volkswagen?
That is what's happening.
But that wasn't a request that was made on Volkswagen where the same argument can be made.
I think it needs to happen in all of the significant investments that happen in the country. When I met with finance ministers in Toronto, provincial finance ministers in Toronto at the beginning of this year, I was very clear that the government was really serious about making historic investments in industrial policy, which we are doing, and that we expected provinces to make a fair contribution. And I also do want to say I am really, really optimistic and really confident that we are going to get this across the line. I do also want to say we are expecting the company to make a fair contribution as well. Our government absolutely believes in the green transition. In our budget, with the spring budget, Canada now has an industrial policy worth about $120 billion. Recent TD research suggests that Canada is on par with the U.S. and leading the world in our attractiveness as an investment destination. I am proud of all that. That is all absolutely the right thing to do. But the resources of the federal government are not infinite. And as finance minister, I'm going to be sure that we are careful with how we spend our money, that we are getting fair value for the federal dollars that are invested, and that other partners, in this case Stellantis and the province of Ontario, are making a fair contribution too.
It seems like you have signed a deal with Stellantis. Their letter references that you've made commitments to them. You've made a special contribution agreement, but now you're trying to get Ontario to be a contributor to that after they weren't a contributor to Volkswagen. I'm just trying to understand holistically, what do you think is different between the Stellantis agreement and the Volkswagen agreement?
So, as I think is well known, the work with Stellantis predates the IRA. That's a significant difference. I'm not going to get into the details of our negotiations with Stellantis and with the province of Ontario. Something that I learned during the NAFTA negotiations, and it was a learning experience for all of us, was negotiating in public is never a good idea, and the federal government is not going to do that. And I'm just going to reiterate, we are very excited, very enthusiastic about the auto sector, about EVs in Canada, about Stellantis specifically. I am optimistic, I'm confident that this is going to happen, And, you know, as the person responsible for investing the money of Canadians in this deal, it's really important for me that all the parties pay their fair share.
How do you square that with Stellantis saying that the federal government is not meeting its commitments in the agreement that was laid out in February?
I would say a negotiation is happening right now.
How do you
Now,
square
why
that?
is it a negotiation, though? Isn't it a negotiation after the fact that is the
Yeah.
sort of a horse out of the barn? You are in direct talks with Stellantis, the federal government is, and the province isn't part of those talks. The company and the province are saying that it's the IRA is a federal initiative in the U.S. that you're trying to be competitive with. So why is it not on the federal government? If you think it's worth throwing billions at them, why is it not on the federal government to throw those billions? Why should the province kick in?
I think I've been very clear on why the province should contribute. You know, this is a deal, this is an investment that is an investment first and foremost for Ontario. Canada as a country and Canadian provinces have a long history of these types of investments, of SIF investments. In all the history of those investments, what we always do is have a contribution of the federal government and of the provinces. And one of the reasons for that is regional fairness. And, you know, truly, we have, you know, no one can say in Canada or anywhere in the world that the federal government is not doing our share in terms of green industrial policy. We have a $120 billion plan. What we are saying, though, and we are very clear on this, is the province has to contribute its fair share. That is entirely reasonable, and that is what I am hearing. That's what I heard from MPs at Finance Committee, MPs from other provinces. That is what I am hearing from premiers of other provinces, and that is entirely reasonable.
But you're not saying that yours is that
What is the government
You agreed upon a figure for how much the federal government and the provincial government should contribute to this, and you're just arguing now over who should pay what? Is that where we are?
As I said, I'm not going to go into the details of the negotiation. Negotiating in public is never a good idea. I think the position of the federal government is really clear here. We are excited about this investment. We are confident it's going to go forward. And we are going to ensure we get a good deal for Canadians. And that means Ontario paying its fair share and Stellantis coming to the table with a good deal. Thank you very much.
And can you update what?
Non, non, c'est juste.
Can you also give an update from Korea last night, please, while you're at it?
En français, c'est juste. Alors, le gouvernement fédéral du Canada est absolument convaincu que la transition industrielle verte est une priorité pour notre gouvernement, pour notre pays. C'est pour cette raison que c'était l'élément clé du budget que j'ai déposé en mars. On a maintenant un plan industriel vert d'investir 120 milliards de dollars dans cette transition. Les analyses du Bay Street, par exemple l'analyse du TD, et les analystes en général sont d'accord qu'aujourd'hui, le Canada a un plan à même niveau des États-Unis, que le Canada peut attirer les investissements d'autour du monde. C'est une bonne chose, on est fiers de ça, on va continuer de faire ça. En même temps, on comprend que les ressources du fédéral ne sont pas infinies. On comprend aussi l'importance de la justice régionale. Et quand on fait un grand investissement, comme on discute avec Stellantis dans une province en particulier, c'est important pour nous d'avoir la participation du province. C'est important que la province fasse sa juste part. Et c'est ce que les ministres des Finances des provinces me disent, c'est ce que les premiers ministres des provinces me disent. C'était une question qui a été posée, une question très raisonnable, très juste, qui a été posée quand j'ai témoigné devant la comité des financières. Merci beaucoup.
Could you give us an update just on the talks they had in Korea last night?
Can we get an update on the status of negotiations with Stellantis and the federal government?
Well, you've heard from Minister Champagne. He is in Korea. He is leading this effort. He's confident that we're going to continue to make this deal work. I think we'll have an opportunity to see the other partner, who actually is also based out of Korea, in LG. And I know that Minister Champagne will give everyone an update as soon as there's one to be had.
What do you think of the fact? What do you think of the fact? What do you think of the fact that in the UK, Stellantis is also threatening to close down a plant in the UK if they don't renegotiate their Brexit deal and lower tariffs? So, what does that tell you about the negotiating tactics of the company?
Well, I won't speak for the company, but I will speak about what we have been doing as a government, which is creating a battery ecosystem, fighting for electric vehicles and the manufacturing of them here in Canada. We've got some terrific deals, terrific investments to build electric and to build vehicles and to build them and to export them into the U.S. And we fought really hard to make sure that Canada was included in those credits for the purchasing of EVs. So I'm very confident that we're going to keep building electric and creating a green economy in autos.
Minister Stellantis is claiming that the government has given them a written commitment that they would increase the investment and match the production subsidies, and that the government is failing to execute that agreement. So how do you convince international investors that this government will keep its word?
This government has kept its word. This government has attracted investment. These investments are here. We are building these manufacturing capabilities, and
now it's at risk. That investment's at risk. They may leave. So
well, I think that the negotiations are continuing, and Minister Champagne, I know, will have more to say about this, and this work is ongoing.
Does it show the folly? Does it show the folly of pouring billions into a company that, if they had a business case to do the job in the first place, doesn't need more billions?
I think the bet that we have made in Canada is a bet for the green economy, and particularly the green automobile economy, to attract the order of investments that we have already to create thousands upon thousands of jobs in Canada is the focus, and this work will continue.
But why did Ontario say the province needs to pay its fair share, and then the Ford said the opposite? So is this becoming a dispute between the province and the federal government?
This is work that we do together, and you have seen our government do work together with the province when we are putting an investment in. No matter where it is, we have been working with provincial and territorial governments, and that's what this is. And I think that I should let François Philippe keep doing the work that he is doing on behalf of the Canadian auto sector, and he'll give you an update as soon as possible.
But your government didn't ask. Your government.
Is Export Development Canada going to extend its loan guarantee to Trans Mountain?
I will give you an update on that as soon as I'm able to.
Your government didn't ask Ontario to contribute on the Volkswagen deal. Why on this one?
Minister, just wondering on the Alberta wildfires, whether there's been any major impacts at all to the agriculture sector as a result of the wildfires, and what could the government do to help farmers out?
Well, I had some exchanges with Minister Horner yesterday or the day before to keep track. Our officials are also in conversation with theirs. But as of now, the agricultural sector is not too much impacted, but I mean, there might be some situations. So obviously, the business risk management programs would be the first one to be triggered. So we're following the situation, and Minister Horner will keep me posted.
Sure, and then so that management program, like what happens, what is triggered, and how does that help farmers who might be impacted?
Well, these are kind of risk insurance program. So they could get support in the case of, an emergency like this or a disaster, if they have to rebuild, if they have to buy additional animal feed, for example, if they have to move their animals. So that type of exceptional costs could be covered by agri-recovery, for example.
All right. Anything else that could be offered that they could tap into?
Well, we will keep in close contact because we care for our farmers and ranchers, and we stay ready to support.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I just want to get an update on the Alberta wildfires. Where do we stand in terms of federal
support? Where are things going in the next days?
I attended Alberta with the Prime Minister and Minister Boissonnault on Monday. We visited the Canadian Armed Forces. They have approximately 400 people deployed in to assist the province in their response. As well, we've been working very closely with municipalities and the Canadian Red Cross in assisting with refugees, the evacuees from those evacuated communities. It's still a very significant and dangerous situation in Alberta, and we're working very closely with the provincial authorities and the provincial government to make sure that federal resources and supports are there as required.
Is there any plan to build up more federal resources than what we have right now?
We work, our Government Operations Centre and our officials work really closely with the Provincial Emergency Operations Centre, determining what resources are required, where and when they need to be applied, and we work very closely with the Canadian Armed Forces. Right now, we've deployed the resources that they asked for, and we believe that that's an appropriate and adequate response, but we're also well connected to them, and if needs continue to escalate, we'll be there to respond.
And staff turnover, burnout, any of those?
Well, one of the things the Canadian Armed Forces is doing is they've been backfilling for some of those extraordinary firefighters. In addition to SIFC, which is an organization that collaborates and coordinates the movement of firefighters from across the country, they've been able to move and acquire fighting services from other provinces. But one of the challenges we're facing with that is we are seeing, for example, that there's a significant number of wildfires that have now broken out in Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and in the Northwest Territories. And so SIFC is also reaching out to other foreign countries, the United States, Mexico, Australia, and New Zealand, where we've gone and helped them in the past, and in this case, we're asking them to come and help us.
Can you remind me about costing here? Who foots the bill for this? Is this coming out of the military's budget? Is it the feds?
Yeah. Well, some of the response is in the Canadian Armed Forces budget. Part of it is also where there's significant damage. We have a disaster financial assistance arrangement. We work very closely with the provinces. They determine eligibility, but it's also based on eligibility criteria of what's reimbursable from the federal government. That usually comes after the event, but actually managing the event, a number of things. Certainly the deployment of the Canadian Armed Forces, that's something that the federal government foots the bill on that, as we should. But we also have what we call a matching fund with the province and with the Canadian Red Cross. So for every dollar people donate, for example, to Canadian Red Cross, both the province and the federal government are matching that. And so that provides money to support community organizations, support some of the people who've been displaced. And those types of supports are what's needed immediately, and we're doing our best to make sure that people have what they need to get through a very difficult time. Thanks, Cormac. No, that's it. Thanks a lot.
Encouraging them to do everything they can to reach a resolution and to avoid disruption. As you know, we have a federal mediator on the ground. Minister of Labour is involved, so I'm concerned, and I hope to find a way to reach a resolution.
What else can the government do to try and prevent a strike at this point?
I think for now, what we want to say and do is encourage both parties to find a deal. I do not want to put my finger on the scale. I do not want to preempt the discussions. I want to encourage both parties to find a resolution at the table.
And what kind of protections are there for passengers if there is a strike?
There are, obviously, the airlines have obligations towards their customers. But ultimately, the biggest obligation is to make sure that they deliver the service that they sold to customers. So I hope they avoid disruption.
Liberals voted for a high-speed rail system. Do you rule that idea out?
I never ruled that idea out. As I said, we are exploring options. Look, let me just say, I'm excited that people are talking about this. It is our government that's making this dream a reality, and I am honored to be part of this process. I welcome all input, I welcome suggestions, but as I said to Canadians, we are looking at options, including a high-speed option. Once we select a partner, we are going to finalize what the route looks like and what the speed is like.
And when is that going to happen?
So we are just closed the request for qualification phase to select, to narrow down the potential partners. Then we're going to launch the request for proposal this summer and end it by next summer, by next summer of next year, we're going to select a partner who will work with us on implementing the project.
You're talking high frequency, not high speed, right?
I think we could do both. The frequency objective is a public policy objective that connects community, that offers convenience, but the speed is an option that we are looking at. At minimum, we're saying that the speeds can go as fast as 200, but can we do it faster? That's the question I'm asking, and yes, I'm looking for positive answer to get us there.
Do your amendments to the Passenger Bill of Rights include labor disputes, and if they don't, should they?
Look, we don't want to, as I said, put our finger on the scale and offer any, appear to be tipping the scale one way or another in the path of finding a settlement through collective bargaining negotiations. So that is why we do not talk about, we leave parties to find a way to reach an agreement on their own.
The question is whether the Bill of Rights covers a strike.
The Bill of Rights, yes. So let me just say this. The Bill of Rights covers responsibility at the airlines that are within their control.
And
that includes a strike. Okay.
Keep operating if Line 5 gets shut down by this court case?
Line 5, I was just in Detroit yesterday, and I repeated the message to the media there that Line 5 is extremely important not only to Canada, but to the United States. In fact, I mentioned that Detroit Airport receives aviation fuel through Line 5. So it is an important infrastructure that needs to keep running, and obviously we'll work with the U.S. on maintaining its safety, its operation, but it is a critical infrastructure.
So what are the implications for airports like Pearson if Line 5 does get shut down? And what are the contingencies that you're looking at to try and address those?
The implications are significant, not only to Pearson Airport, not only to Detroit Airport, but to our mutual economies. And there's been ongoing discussion, but I could tell you that our focus is making sure that Line 5 continues operations.
But are there contingency plans in case?
We're having conversations about that, but the focus is maintaining Line 5 operations. Thank you.
A couple of things I'd like to share. First, I'm excited to be able to say that the ad hoc committee with respect to Winnipeg Labs, we are ready to begin that process. It's been a long process to get all the parties together, to get the members populated, to get the panel of arbiters. But we now have 3 esteemed former justices who've agreed to take on the role of arbiter. This means that with respect to the Winnipeg Labs, that those members of Parliament appointed to that committee will get an opportunity to look at any and all documents. And as a result of looking at those documents, we'll get somebody's very excited over there. As a result of getting to look at those documents, As a result of being able to look at these documents, if there's any disagreement on redactions or what should be shared, then there's an opportunity to refer that to the panel of arbiters who will make an independent, binding decision to make sure that the redactions that have taken place are appropriate. So if we recall, this had been a very big issue to know whether or not that the redactions that took place with the Winnipeg Labs process were appropriate. Now this independent panel of arbiters will be able to make that final determination. It's an excellent question. I mean, the first problem was that we only had one partner at the beginning in the NDP, and we were ready to move with it. Then the Bloc indicated that they wanted to participate, and then the Conservatives. So adding them on, getting those members identified took time. Then we had to do the security identification. Then after we had all the parties in place, we had to be able to find the panel of arbiters and secure them. So the process did take some time. This is something that hasn't been done in a long time. It's the same model that was used under Stephen Harper's government for the Afghan detainee documents. So it took a long time, but we're ready now to go.
Sur cette phase, savez-vous si ça va passer rapidement au Sénat? Est-ce que vous avez des discussions avec les sénateurs?
Oui, j'espère qu'on peut adopter le projet de loi très rapidement. Je pense qu'il y a des consentements unanimes, c'est presque ça, aux chambres des communes. Alors, les chambres des communes, avec les membres qui sont élus, a dit que c'est tellement important pour les langues françaises et pour de protéger les langues françaises. Alors, j'espère que le Sénat peut adopter le projet de loi aussi rapide que possible. Et j'ai plusieurs occasions de parler avec les sénateurs et sénatrices, et j'espère que ça, c'est le cas.
Est-ce que M. Osfader qui a voté contre, pensez-vous qu'il y aura des conséquences concernant le dossier?
Oui, c'est une question pour le whip. Je pense que c'était une vote tellement importante. Il y a presque l'unanimité avec ça, mais c'est pas une question pour moi. Mais I also have something else. I just want to talk because I think that right now we've seen a lot of chaos. There's a lot going on in the House, but as House Leader, I like to take a moment and talk about the fact that we made a lot of progress on a lot of legislation. We're talking about C13, which is going to be incredibly important for protecting language rights, for protecting the French language. That was now passed nearly unanimously, and it's off to the Senate, where, as I said, we're very hopeful that we're going to be able to see that receive royal assent very, very soon. I think when we see the cooperation on C45, which takes important action for Indigenous self-determination and reconciliation, the fact that that was done unanimously by the House. On C21 on firearms, the fact that we're able to take important action on handguns and taking assault-style weapons off our streets is exceptionally important. We're seeing that passing through the House this week. And when you look at the provisions around ghost guns and how urgently we're seeing folks in law enforcement saying we need action on ghost guns, this is important action that's being taken. I want to talk about the Budget Implementation Act, which has a whole host of measures to help with affordability, everything from dental care to many other provisions, which we were finally able to get out of filibuster and moving forward. S5, which represents important movement for the Environmental Protections Act. Or we're talking about bail reform, which was introduced yesterday. The point that I'm making is sometimes in the thrust and party of partisan politics, we miss that Parliament is doing important things. I think it's important to take a moment to just recognize that we are making really important progress on behalf of Canadians. My attention... What's going on? No, what's going on is that I think that there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of torqued up rhetoric, and in the background of that, it's important to recognize that important progress is being made. We have a lot more to do. Certainly, we have 4 more weeks in front of us after we spend a week in our constituencies. But I think it's important for people to pause and to take a reflection on the fact that Parliament is, in a very collaborative fashion, working across aisle, in many cases unanimously, in other cases with 2 or 3 other parties, finding a way to get the business of the nation done.
Mr. Chong wants the government to compel CSIS to have the Speaker inform anyone who's threatened by a foreign diplomat. What do you think of that proposal from his testimony?
I think we have to take a step back and say that a threat against any member of Parliament or the family of any member of Parliament, or frankly the privilege of any member of Parliament to speak in this place and represent their constituents, a threat against one is a threat against all. And if we allow a threat to stand against one member of Parliament, it becomes a precedent. And that precedent can be used in a myriad way against any of us. So we absolutely must work with our security and intelligence community to find the best way to make sure members of Parliament, their families, and their privilege are protected. However, the thing that I would say is that it is not up to parliamentarians to make determinations of what constitutes a security threat. We rely on our security and intelligence community. We have to do that. We have to make sure that they are using that information and sharing it, which is one of the things we're saying. No matter how low they deem a threat to be, no matter if they don't think it's something that should be shared, it's our position that a member of Parliament should be aware of that information. That's a new protocol that's in place, regardless of how low level the threat is deemed to be, so that MPs can be aware and take action accordingly to make sure that they're protected.
Well, what about what Parliament can do? Should Parliament censure Zhao Wei, for example, given what we know about the fact that he's been expelled?
I think we have to be very careful. I think when we're dealing with national security and handling national security, when Parliament doesn't have all the information, when they don't have all of the documents, and necessarily can't because they're behind an appropriate wall of national security, for Parliament to start making decisions on national security, I think could be injurious to that process. That's why we have NSI-COP, where parliamentarians can see every document, including those which are unredacted, but that has to be a limited number of parliamentarians who are in a secure environment who make oaths to not misuse or to share that information. So we have a security and intelligence apparatus. We need to make sure it's well supported. They're the ones best to make these determinations. Okay, thanks so much.
Well, there are a number of different ways to look at this. I'd rather leave that to the community to speak and decide about the suitability of these laws. Not the federal government. It is privately owned land, and so it's important to recognize this isn't reserve land. That is, that is Crown land. This is privately owned, and so there's obviously ways forward that we are proposing with the community to provide that support should they choose to take these approaches. But because this land is privately owned, it is difficult for the federal government to impose a solution. Not that we would want to do that anyway, because of course we want to work with communities on solutions that they determine for themselves.
But the population is afraid, Minister. I mean, there's an open letter by people who don't want to sign because they're afraid, they say, of their house being torched, like the house of the former chief, Mr. Gabriel. They fear for their life. They're talking about streetcars, cars racing on the street, drugs being sold illegally, the landfill. I mean, obviously there's something going on, and it seems like everybody is playing tennis here, not in getting involved.
Well, there are, obviously, if people are afraid or frightened for their life or being criminally threatened, there are procedures with the province of Quebec who would enforce the criminal code and who would be responsible for protecting citizens if there are criminal violations. And so I expect that I'll be speaking with Minister Lafreniere, for example, in the days to come about this. But in terms of the contamination of the land, we're working closely with the community. As I said, we will be there to help clean up the land once a solution in terms that the community chooses is suitable.
Do you know how much that would cost?
I don't have an estimate of how much that would cost.
And were the inspectors of the federal government threatened as well?
I don't have news about that, but certainly we can get back to you if there's been any reports.
I mean, there is an important situation. It seems like your colleague, you're not aware.
If federal inspectors have been threatened, then I would assume that appropriate measures have been taken. But I have personally been notified of that, and I'll have my press secretary follow up with you. Thank you.
Monsieur le ministre, on aimerait vous entendre sur ce qui se passe à Kanesatake. Vous avez vu certainement l'enquête de la presse. Il semble y avoir un état de non-droit. Qu'est-ce que le gouvernement fédéral fait par rapport à ça?
Bien, d'abord, c'est un problème énorme. Le dépotoir illégal qui est situé sur le terrain de Kanesatake a tout le potentiel d'être une bombe environnementale. D'abord, je pense que c'est important de dire que simplement en vertu du fait qu'il y a des Autochtones impliqués, que ce n'est pas uniquement la responsabilité du fédéral et que le fédéral doit rentrer avec ses gros sabots, puis régler l'enjeu, puis sortir. C'est un enjeu immensément complexe. Ça ne veut pas dire que depuis un certain temps qu'on n'a pas fait d'initiative avec le conseil de bande, fait des propositions pour essayer d'avoir une réflexion dans l'ordre d'un site qui a ce potentiel d'être une bombe environnementale. Soyons aussi clairs pour dire que pendant des années, des Québécois non autochtones, en toute connaissance de cause, ont utilisé le dépotoir de façon illégale. Donc, il y a une responsabilité énorme des gens qui savaient qu'ils pouvaient abuser de ce... J'utiliserai pas le mot non-droit, mais de certains gens qui ont fait un profit à court terme pour sacrifier peut-être l'avenir de leur propre communauté. La ministre Haïdou, en tant que ministre des Services aux Autochtones, va émettre un communiqué de presse cet après-midi, je le crois bien, puis va vous adresser la parole sur les mesures qui ont été avancées. Mais il y a une responsabilité, que ce soit au niveau du conseil de bande, au niveau du fédéral, au niveau du gouvernement du Québec, de s'impliquer puis de s'assurer que cette bombe-là ne s'explose pas.
Mais de manière générale, vous parlez du dépotoir, mais c'est plus large. Les citoyens qui ont écrit cette lettre ouverte anonyme parlent de courses de véhicules dans les rues, de peur de se faire incendier leur maison, comme c'est arrivé au chef Gabriel dans le passé, parlent de criminalité. De manière générale, il semble y avoir, parce qu'il n'y a plus de police qui va là-bas, il semble y avoir un état de non-droit. Qu'est-ce que le gouvernement fédéral fait?
Mme Buzetti, d'abord, il y a un problème plus gros qu'une bombe environnementale, aussi menaçante soit-elle. Vous avez vous-même utilisé le concept de Far West, où beaucoup d'Autochtones, l'imagerie est assez endommageante, puis je ne veux pas vous faire la leçon, puis ce n'est pas ma place de le faire, mais évitons ces termes qui sont très colorés puis qui peuvent blesser des gens. Vous secouez de la tête, là, mais quand on dit le Far West, là, c'est toujours l'imagerie des Autochtones qui se font tuer. C'est pas nécessairement le non-droit, donc il faut être très précis dans ce qu'on dit. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'il n'y a pas de problème. Il y a un problème de sécurité qui perdure à Kanesatake depuis très longtemps. Et la réalité, c'est que c'est les gens eux-mêmes de Kanesatake qui sont menacés par certains éléments, par certains gens qui sont impliqués dans la criminalité. Que ce soit certains Mohawks ou que ce soit les Hells Angels qui, eux, ne sont pas nécessairement autochtones, qui abusent de cette situation. C'est la réalité que vivent les gens de Ganasatagé. Ben, la réalité, c'est... Ben, vous poserez la question à la sécurité du Québec, la Sûreté du Québec, qui a la juridiction à Ganasatagé. Ils ne sont pas nécessairement la bienvenue pour bien des raisons que vous savez très bien, mais c'est un enjeu qu'on doit travailler avec le gouvernement du Québec et l'autorité que le Québec a sur la sécurité publique des gens de Ganasatagé. Alors, je vous ai dit que c'était d'une immense complexité. On parle de défis de gouvernance dans la communauté, que vous savez très bien de par votre enquête. Vous savez aussi que la Sûreté du Québec a la juridiction, le cas échéant, mais qui refuse des fois d'agir, à certaines occasions avec cause, et aussi l'enjeu environnemental qui risque aussi d'exploser. Alors, mon point dans ça, c'est qu'on a tous une responsabilité certes du fédéral, responsabilité du gouvernement du Québec, et une responsabilité des gens de Ganasatagé et de la gouvernance dans la communauté qui existe maintenant.
Qu'est-ce que vous avez proposé comme solution?
Bien, vous allez voir aujourd'hui la sortie de la ministre Haidou avec son communiqué de presse, puis elle va vous parler directement des mesures qui ont été entreprises.
C'est quoi? Elle ne voulait pas me parler hier parce qu'elle craignait d'être mal traduite dans mon journal.
Je peux pas commenter sur le français de Mme Haidou, mais elle va vous parler, je pense, aujourd'hui et vous adresser la parole sur les mesures qui ont été offertes. Il y a certaines mesures qu'on ne peut pas parler publiquement pour des raisons de sécurité, mais elle va vous parler puis étaler un peu plus sur les enjeux qui ont été offerts. Oui. Oui, absolument. Mais là, je vous en parle maintenant. Vous allez le voir dans le communiqué de presse de Mme Haidou, puis elle va vous parler de vive voix sur les mesures qui ont été entreprises de Services autochtones Canada, dont elle a la responsabilité. Merci.
Bonjour, M. Reyes. J'entends au sujet du sondage de ce matin, le sondage léger qui démontre qu'il y a autant de gens au Québec que dans le reste du Canada qui pensent que c'est pas une bonne idée d'augmenter l'immigration. Quelle est votre réaction?
Bien, ce que je lis du côté du Québec, c'est qu'il y a une inquiétude par rapport à la langue, au maintien du français, et je le partage totalement. Cela dit, il ne faut pas voir l'immigration comme une menace. C'est très possible d'accueillir des immigrants qui s'intègrent. Je suis un exemple, je ne parlais pas un mot de français. Mon père est décédé il y a 2-3 heures ce matin. Et sur son lit de mort, ces jours-ci, ce que j'y jouais, c'était du Vigneault, c'était du Jean-Pierre Ferland. On parle de gens ici qui parlent pas un mot de français, qui sont intégrés. Cette intégration-là, elle est possible. Elle est possible. Et donc, il ne faut pas mettre en contradiction immigration et fait français. Je pense qu'on peut travailler collectivement avec Québec au niveau de la francisation au Québec, au niveau d'avoir un plus grand nombre d'immigrants hors Québec. Et on peut réussir cette intégration-là. Merci.
Le fait qu'à l'extérieur du Québec aussi, c'est la même proportion de gens qui pensent que c'est pas une bonne idée d'avoir davantage d'immigrants. Ça vous dit quoi? Mais
le Canada, à mon avis, est un succès comme nation parce que il l'a mis en contact et aujourd'hui, on a nos peuples autochtones, anglophones, francophones, des gens issus de partout dans le monde. Et il peut y avoir certaines inquiétudes. Mais à quelque part, c'est aussi notre travail de rassurer les gens pour dire que c'est possible d'avoir plus de gens d'ailleurs et être beaucoup plus fort comme tissu social et comme société aussi.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la situation avec les attaqués?
J'étais au chevet de mon père, je ne sais pas.
Moi, ça fait plusieurs jours que ça roule, le fait qu'il y a un dépotoir illégal.
Ça fait 10 jours que je suis au Mexique côté de mon père. Merci.
Bonjour, Mme la ministre. Avez-vous parlé avec les sénateurs des derniers jours, puis est-ce que ça va peut-être renforcer, je dirais, votre espoir que ça va aller vite pour le projet de loi, que ça va être adopté dans les plus brefs délais au Sénat?
J'ai envoyé un message au sénateur Cormier une fois que le projet de loi avait été adopté, et puis finalement, c'est vraiment les seuls contacts que j'ai reçus avec lui.
Puis est-ce que vous avez pas parlé avec d'autres sénateurs pour au moins vérifier s'il y avait du moins de l'approbation pour aller, comme vous le dites, dans les plus brefs délais?
Non.
Non?
Non.
Vous avez vu le calendrier du Sénat, il reste seulement 4 lundis pour la réunion. Avez-vous toujours espoir que vraiment ça se que ça obtienne la sanction royale d'ici la fin des travaux, c'est dans un mois?
Mais premièrement, on respecte absolument que le Sénat a encore du travail à faire. On doit aussi se souvenir qu'ils ont fait une préétude l'année passée. Et puis,
mais ils vous disent
effectivement,
il y a eu des amendements.
Effectivement, nous avons quand même plusieurs alliés pour toute la question des langues officielles au Sénat. Et puis moi, j'ai espoir quand même qu'ils pourront faire le travail, puis on pourra avoir l'adoption d'ici la fin du mois de juin. C'est bien, merci.
If you look at the draft regs that have been published by the US EPA, we're very much aligned with what our biggest trading partner wants to do when it comes to electricity. There is a race to clean up our electricity grid so that we can attract investors who want. If you talk to Minister Champagne,
come over here, Minister.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, no. From the top.
There is a global race to clean up the grid so that you can attract investors who are looking for grids that are either very low emitting or will be net zero by 2035. You have companies out there saying that they will start putting products on the market that will be carbon neutral products, whether it's a car, phones, computers. If we want to be competitive in the 21st century economy, we have to decarbonize our grid. It's about jobs, not just for the next 5 or 10 years, but for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And of course, we want to do that in a way that is affordable for Canadians. We want to have a reliable grid. No one wants to see a situation where we flick off the switch and it's not working. Of course not.
But can you clarify, will they have to phase out fossil fuel power generation by 2035? Because that's what
it's not a fossil fuel-free grid by 2035. What we've said is that it would be a net zero grid by 2035, implying that fossil fuel will still be able to be used, but in a more constrained way. And we want to have a net zero, a carbon neutral grid by 2035. I can't be more specific than that. We will be publishing soon the draft regulations on that.
What kind of penalties would Saskatchewan face if they don't phase out coal by 2030 or make sure that all coal is abated?
Well, I can speak specifically about coal because the regulations on clean electricity. But we've regulated the ban on coal through SEPA, which is a criminal tool that the federal government has. So not complying with this regulation would be a violation of Canada's criminal code. Thank you. Merci.